Hello, I'm Malan. Um, I'm going to be chatting around COVID-19 and what it means for South Africa's tech sector. So, it is a definitely a unique and massive threat to the things we do, but I also see some opportunity in that. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. And because of COVID-19, we are doing a video recording instead of a normal talk, and I have cunningly repurposed my studio, aka garage, for this very occasion. So I hope it works. So before I get going, I figured I'll just tell you guys briefly who I am and what OfferZen, the company I work at, does. So, if you don't know us, OfferZen is a recruitment platform, a marketplace where tech professionals, developers, and data scientists can get really cool job opportunities. So my background has been in startups for a number of years. Actually, like I started playing around building software in companies while studying still. So I've been involved in the kind of early days of a number of South African companies. Some that are, I think, more well known, like SnapScan. Some people know that just because it's a common payments app, or Luna, which is a cryptocurrency exchange, and then sort of a number of other startups. So I'm incredibly passionate about basically using technology to solve problems, and generally I like kind of the idea of a business model or business as the wrapper for that. So that's sort of, I guess, in a very high level, my background. I studied electronic engineering and computer science, so sort of making things and running software is the kind of like, I guess, primary way that I identify with my role in the world. Even though these days, I guess, I'm more on the sort of business side, at least at OfferZen. So before we get going, I want to take you guys back to 2014. Towards the end of the year, the Ebola crisis in West Africa had sort of really started becoming hectic. And Philip, who is my co-founder at OfferZen, and the guy wearing the ridiculous leather jacket, is here in a video explaining to one of the US news organizations at our flat, actually, what we're doing in terms of Ebola. So in 2014, we had some experience doing mobile health projects, and when the Ebola crisis came, we decided, shit, it looks really, really hectic, and it might be something that we can use our skills to help. And during this whole thing, we ended up getting sort of like building a few apps, getting things distributed, and generally trying to be helpful. So we did have like some lessons, a whole lot of what not to do, and a few wins sprinkled here and there back in 2014, which I am trying to apply today in terms of how we as a company, as an OfferZen, think about the kind of corona pandemic, and then also broadly how we can help. So just sort of to explain some of the context I've got is thinking and lessons learned back in 2014 around Ebola. The important thing I think around the chat today is the framing I have in my mind when I think of OfferZen. It really is, I think, being a tech community. There are about 90,000 South African sort of tech professionals in our network, software developers, but then also UX and UI designers, data scientists, project managers, and these people engage with us in many, many different ways. Some of them we've helped get a job, some just read our newsletter, some of them come to our events. But in general, I think it's a pretty sort of tight and vibrant community. And then on the other side, we've got a whole bunch of companies using us, sort of from startups to enterprises, sort of 1,400 plus companies actively using OfferZen to, as a source of hiring tech talent. So that's basically what OfferZen is. It's South Africa's largest tech community. And I think this is quite an important thing in terms of how we can make a difference with COVID-19. Okay, so before kind of jumping into things like the opportunity presented by COVID-19 or something, I think the super good reality check is that COVID-19 is pretty freaking bad. It's bad for you, on a personal health level and on an economic level. So I think just keeping that in mind during this whole thing is probably pretty a good perspective. So the two things that I try and keep in mind to sort of remind myself how bad this is, given that personally still it's reasonably abstract for me, something like economic meltdown or whatever is a reasonably abstract thing, and thus far at least none of my friends have gotten sick with COVID-19, so it feels abstract, but I know it isn't. I know it is very, very real. So two things I try and remember is, one is Dr. Lee over there, who was the first doctor who identified that there's a new highly contagious and very dangerous virus out. You can read up about him online, and the important thing is he died from the virus he was trying to warn all of us about. So that's a pretty big reality check for me. And then something which kind of struck me a lot more than exchange rates or market indices falling or whatever is this unemployment stat from the New York Times, where last week 3.3 million Americans kind of filed unemployment claims. And you can sort of see previous numbers, even in 2008. And so the unemployment is sort of in this, hundreds of thousands band, maybe heading up to 600,000. And then last week, it's totally off the charts. 3.3 million humans filing unemployment claim, which is sort of, if you just think how many people that is already impacted, way before the kind of virus on a health level has reached its peak in America. It's sort of summary, COVID-19 is really bad, and it's really bad for you on an individual level, and it's sort of not to be underestimated. So inside OfferZen, we basically said, look, this is a state of war. We as individuals, a company, a country, and an entire world face sort of an existential threat to our way of life. And a very practical way of showing that is right now we can't get out of our houses. That's a huge, huge negative impact on our quality of life. So that type of impact is way more severe for a whole lot of people who are already sick with COVID, and will sort of impact more and more people for a longer period of time. So we basically said, okay, guys, this is an existential threat to our way of life. So in typical product team fashion, the dev team at OfferZen said, okay, great, guys, what does that mean for our dev team? And I think a lot of us are thinking that it's okay, this is pretty bad, this is crazy, but practically, I'm a coder. What does it mean for me? What do I do? How do I think about it? And that's really what this talk is about. So, I guess the starting point for this is to go, okay, when things get bad, when shit hits the fan, what does that look like, and what do you do about it in this kind of crisis? So, I think us as a tech community, this graph illustrates the kind of impact of Corona. And really, so what you're looking at here is a normalized, so out of a normal baseline view of the number of companies that are sending interview requests on OfferZen. So now the sample is hundreds and hundreds of companies. So it's pretty robust in that sense across industries. And you can see week on week, there's a kind of accumulates day on day. So you can see, let's say the week of the 24th of Feb, that's the yellow line. You can see sort of on a Monday when a batch goes live, you get about 53% of the companies who will be sort of hitting the total, sending interview requests on the Monday, and then it kind of goes up all the way to that week was 98% of the normalized baseline. The next week was our baseline exactly at 100%. So you sort of have this cumulative running total over a week. And then 16 March is when sort of on an economic level, I think one could say Corona hit the SA tech industry. So you'll see this graph doesn't show anything on the Friday, but it basically stopped at 50%. So effectively within the span of a week, the number of companies hiring tech professionals just halved on our platform. And as I said, it's a pretty large sample, so it's reasonably representative, I think, of the tech ecosystem in South Africa. So effectively overnight, we sort of had a halving of our industry. So that's a pretty huge thing. And if you're wondering what happened next, the simple answer is it's roughly stayed at that level. The weeks since have all basically followed that green line, and effectively it's like the SA tech industry has been halved since 16 March. Now that's pretty radical if you think how many people and how many companies you're talking about. So when this happened, I was like, wow, okay, this is really, really bad. Like, that means a huge amount of companies are under strain. And sort of the thing I did is I said, I've got to phone my friends, like phone a few other people in the space, figure out what's going on, figure out what we can do. And so Sunday evening, I WhatsApped a few people and sort of a whole mix of people who I thought could help. So Asha, who's the CEO of Sweep South, Haman and Dan, they make the legendary Eskom app, the dev behind that, and then Davina, who's a friend of mine, who's the head of digital at Investec. So those are some of the people I WhatsApp and I said, hey, I think this COVID-19 thing is going to have a huge impact on South Africa's tech ecosystem. Do you want to join a group? Let's discuss what we can do and how we can help people. And they were all really, really keen. And then while I was doing this, by chance, I logged in to LinkedIn, which I very rarely do. And I had a message from an old friend, Willem Fourie, who's now Professor Willem. And he basically asked me, do we, as an OfferZen, have capabilities which could slow COVID spread in South Africa? Now that's like, wow, okay, that's a pretty broad and difficult question. And I also noticed he's now at the SDG hub at the University of Pretoria. So he's sort of asking for real reasons. I was like, oh, wow, shit, okay. I have no idea, but I think what I'll do is just phone more friends. So what I did is I started WhatsApping people and getting them to WhatsApp more people, all in the tech ecosystem, all people who can help. And very soon, we had a huge amount of people who were in a group discussing stuff they can do, like how can the tech industry help, and basically leverage what we have to sort of help South Africa broadly and the tech ecosystem in terms of handling COVID-19. So suddenly we had all of these people keen to help and started sketching out, what would that look like? A data model. We suddenly had this idea of like volunteers keen to help. There's a whole lot of info about them. We figured we'd probably want to drive projects. People had a whole lot of ideas of projects and things. So we're using Miro. It's like a virtual whiteboarding thing to map all of this out. And the standard thing you think as a coder is, okay, what I need to do now is, spin up Rails in my case, and basically build a basic CRUD app. And that is actually how OfferZen started. Philip and I basically spun up a Rails instance and just started hacking away on a basic CRUD app. But what I have learned over the years is that, well, that's pretty fun and awesome. It isn't necessarily the best way to very, very quickly get something reasonably robust out. So the one trick we've learned from Stephen, who's our VP of growth, is that using kind of no code or low code platforms, especially for prototyping, can be really, really cool. So he helped us and he set up a knack app, which is basically like a no-code platform where you literally pick on a drop-down, hey, this is my data model, these are my views and things like that. So you might be thinking, well, no self-respecting coder would use a tool like that. But what is absolutely awesome with using something like that to just get started is you don't have to worry about, data security, privacy, it's GDPR compliant, auth works, all of that stuff. And you're not focused on the code. You can basically 100% focus on the problem you're trying to map and solve. So in a crazy situation like this, if you're sort of trying to build a thing, starting off with a tool like Knack or some other no-code platform or whatever you want to use to just really, really quickly prototype your basic concept works well. So what we did is we built a very, very simple Knack app where we could firstly group everyone in the WhatsApp group, because suddenly it had escalated to 40 plus people and was becoming unmanageable. So we pulled everyone in to the Knack app with bios and things to make it easier to understand what's going on. And that was a pretty good start. For reference, we now on Tuesday after starting to ping people on Sunday, last Tuesday. Then one of the key projects that came out from Willem's message after I started chatting with him is the idea of a vulnerability map. Basically trying to figure out which communities in South Africa would be most badly affected by COVID-19. So that involves analyzing a bunch of variables. Could be the age of the community, the healthcare resources, socioeconomic conditions and everything of effectively the whole country, mapping that on top of each other, and then figuring out where COVID-19 would have kind of the most devastating impact. And that map would allow the government to better allocate healthcare resources and sort of preemptively get ready for things. So that was basically the first project we jumped on, is trying to map out these vulnerable communities. And all of this being driven by our Hacky Knack app, which kind of implements our data model and everything. So set the project requirements up in there and then asked for volunteers. And fortunately, we got a huge amount of very passionate people from the tech community who immediately jumped in and said, hey, I'm keen to help. I can help code or do some data analysis. I've got GIS tooling, or I've got this data set we can use. And so we got a huge amount of volunteers very, very quickly, sort of within hours, which is really awesome. And we set up a subcommunity around those people. So it sounds very fancy. What it meant is we made a new WhatsApp group and started sharing the problem statement, discussing that, and setting up a few calls to actually get things built. If I recall, I think by Wednesday, we had a sort of first version of the mapping out, and Willem could present it at the union buildings to the guys from the Office of the Presidency. And that got sort of worked really, really well. They suddenly had a pretty good idea of which communities to focus on, and they were super excited that they could get this answer so quickly. And we were thinking, great, that's awesome. Tech community helped out. Good job. Guys like Andries from Riskscape, put a huge amount of effort in and volunteered a lot of time and tooling to get this done. So that was pretty awesome. What happened next was quite interesting. Is Constance, or Dr. Mabela, she is the lady on the right at the back, WhatsApped me and said, hey, I was in this presentation that Willem did around the vulnerability mapping, and it was pretty cool and useful. Could you guys help us more? Could you have a chat? I work with Dr. Amagopa. He's the guy in the front in the orange shirt. One thing I noticed then is, other than basically myself and Tumi in the picture there in the middle next to me, pretty much everyone else is a professor or a doctor of some kind, which is quite funny. But she basically said, hey, could you come up, meet us in Pretoria, and basically chat around how we as the government and the presidency can work more with the tech community. And we invited Willem along because he'd sort of helped us get going on the vulnerability map, and we were very excited to work with him. So that discussion happened, I think, on the Thursday, and we had a quick telecon on the Friday with the two of them to figure out what's what, and then Tumi and I got on a plane on Saturday morning early to go and see them and discuss kind of how we do this. And we had a really good chat where we kind of got a much better understanding of how the government was thinking about the problem, of kind of the key issues they'd identified, and the ways like that we jointly thought, we could help, that the tech community could play its part and sort of do things that have positive impact in this whole madness that is COVID-19. So it was a really good chat, really good meeting, and we learned a lot. And then the next step was that we got an official request from the presidency of South Africa saying basically, hey, please help. And please ask the rest of the tech community to join you and help. And kind of what the request was really about was kind of like four things. So firstly, hey, please raise awareness and kind of get the support of the tech community for these problems. Then work with the government to identify projects that can help respond to the crisis. And then for these projects, recruit and coordinate volunteers from the tech community to kind of help solve them, and make sure that these community members are connected to the right government partners in the kind of various units inside the South African government. So that on a high level was effectively the mandate that we got given. And then in an awkward preemption, we decided to call the project Unlockdown. That was before the lockdown was actually announced. We thought it was hilarious at the time. It obviously rapidly became less hilarious, but so we launched Project Unlockdown as a way to sort of recruit volunteers from the tech community, figure out what problems would have high impact if they're solved, and then coordinate volunteers and try and help solve them. And we basically now have about 6 people dedicated from OfferZen kind of volunteering on this thing, and hundreds of people at this stage from the community who've jumped in and said they're keen to help. So the sort of entry point is once again our knack app, where volunteers can sign up, provide a bit of details, say kind of the skills they have and what they can do, and then wrote a blog post which basically explained all of this, explained the meeting in Pretoria, explained the kind of request for help, and just asking the community, whoever is able to volunteer, to sort of please sign up. We then also set out and kept discussing what other projects are sort of like most impactful, could be most impactful to the government's ability to respond to the crisis. And then of course sort of like recruiting volunteers from the community to help out. So sort of examples of projects that we've worked on since the vulnerability mapping is one active project is track and trace, which is basically to figure out the sort of transmission path of COVID-19 from people who've got infected, and to basically try and prevent the spread from spiraling out of control. And then the other project we're working on, which is sort of a meta project pulling a whole load of maker communities together, is around rapidly manufacturing medical equipment, where you guys might be aware there are quite a lot of communities in South Africa working on things like 3D printing ventilators and whatever. And we decided the thing we could do is try and pull all of that together, make sure those communities get connected to the people inside the kind of government and medical sector who need the equipment and understand the needs, and make sure sort of everyone's aware of the different efforts and can help out where needed. And then some of the projects that I've personally been involved in quite a lot is around the economic problems and potential of the current situation. So on the problem side, the kind of economic impact of COVID-19 is incredibly severe and negative in South Africa, kind of across all industries. As I showed you from OfferZen's data, we can see the effect on the tech industry, but I mean, that's obviously even more true at this point with the lockdown for things like restaurants. It's massively disruptive to manufacturing and all of those things. So COVID-19 is creating huge economic damage. And part of our projects are around tracking that and helping the government and private sector understand how they can sort of help, help small businesses and whatever keep afloat and fight this. But then on the other side, we're also saying COVID-19 is effectively changing the world. And it's like suddenly everyone is working remotely. Everyone's got to figure out how remote tooling works. Companies, for example, companies that have generally said, oh, it's not a thing they want to do, are now forced to suddenly do it. So a whole load of like new opportunities are being created. And I personally think there's a huge opportunity for like new companies to be formed. This has generally been true of sort of bad economic times. So a number of really successful companies generally tend to get started in an economic downturn. This specific economic downturn has the additional fact that it literally changes on a very real way how individuals live. Like we're all stuck at home at the moment. That has a huge impact in terms of actually changing day-to-day life for people. And I think that change basically is can be seen as opportunity, kind of if you put the right effort and mindset to it. So in terms of how I generally think about converting threat to opportunity, and I think if one is, let's say, thinking around building products or even a company, a startup in this kind of environment, like, how do you want to think about it? So I think the most important thing is to firstly acknowledge this is a threat. This is something serious and seriously bad. So the first step is just make sure you survive. That kind of means, remaining physically healthy, resting, getting exercise, even if it's in your home, and sort of functional in terms from a work context. So that could be as an individual, making sure you're set up correctly and you can code or whatever at home. Or in my case, like I spent a lot of time thinking about our team at OfferZen and making sure that we can remain functional when we're all at home, and our customers are all at home. Like, how do we remain functional as a company and make sure we can still help people get tech jobs during all of this? It's like, I think like many companies, that problem we face is even more sort of important now. As I showed on the numbers earlier, the tech industry is under massive pressure. So it's absolutely critical that we manage to do our job well now. And I think once you've ticked off that first step, and you're sort of in a stable position where you're okay and sort of survival is okay, what I find is the best next thing to do is to just see how can you help others, not to to even ask the kind of, hey, I want to help someone, and you're not at a profit off it yet. But if you have the luxury to put time in, and most people would at least have a little bit of time in a day or over a weekend to figure out how can you just help other people in this crisis situation. I find that firstly it's like a nice thing to do, and it kind of helps keep you sane. But I also think it helps you make that transition from being under threat to seeing opportunity. There's something about helping other people that kind of changes your mindset. I think it kind of opens you up to new possibilities and ideas. What I've found is when I'm in the mode of kind of helping people and trying to create value for others, you kind of get a peek with that open mindset into what the future will be like. So what I find super interesting around the work we've done thus far is just seeing how ad hoc communities spring up now and really, really rapidly solve problems. Like the tooling we're using, the way we think about it is super, super interesting. Gabby, my brother's partner, is like at home with us now, busy trying to figure out how to make a primary school, kind of like a small, very small primary school that usually runs out of a house, work remotely, and sharing learnings there. And it's a strange kind of like glimpse very, very rapidly of what the future could be like. And then I think the sort of final step is if you're in a solid spot where you're surviving and functional, you're in the mindset of helping others and you're kind of engaging with the world. You're observant, learning effectively in this case, like what the future is going to be like, what rapid changes are happening, to then say, hey, what is missing? What are the pain points that people in this new future are experiencing, and like how do I build that? What's missing? Like how do I solve that gap that exists? And I think it's that last bit that often is the seed of a super, super like impactful company. So if you sort of go through these 4 steps, and then you can map companies like startups that have now become very large onto this, and sort of look at their history, and very often you can see this, I think, basic pattern. So I'd recommend like this as a mindset. If you're interested in either building a new product or even an entire new company, the trick is around converting this feeling and reality of being under threat into a feeling and a reality of opportunity, centered around firstly survival, then helping others, then you leveraging that help really to learn, and then finally to build towards that like future you're experiencing. And then also sort of just a shameless plug, if you are looking to help, consider the Unlockdown project. We are volunteering quite a lot of time and effort into it, and there are a bunch of really, really good people who are putting in effort, and it's like massively impactful projects for our country. So if you've got the ability to sort of help and volunteer, we'd really, really appreciate it. Cool, but I'll chat with you guys in the Q&A now. Thank you so much for your time.
Hello. I think I'm live. Hopefully that's working. Sam, Samantha's telling me to not pick my nose. Thanks for that. Noted. If you guys have questions and things, by the way, we're hanging out in the DevConf 2020 Stream 1 channel. So there are a few questions. The one was, yes, the video was broken. Sorry about that. Philip was very good at helping me set up a recording in our garage, but not so good at not getting video to freeze. Joshua is, I am pasted, yes. This is an amazing OfferZen background. Someone was asking how that's working on Zoom. The real background is my mom's desk. Philip and I and our partners and dogs are all at my mom's house. So Sam is asking, how do less technically skilled people volunteer? Like, how can they volunteer? Well, I think there's a hell of a lot of stuff going on. Josh Lewis just shared with me the organization he works at, forgood.coza, which somehow I didn't actually know about. Maybe forgotten because of sleep deprivation, but it seems pretty awesome. So if you go to forgood.coza, there's a whole bunch of things you can volunteer for. You can, obviously, if you have some kind of graphic design or any skills, data science, analytics, access to interesting data, do look around on that OfferZen on Lockdown app as well. It's not just a coder thing, but there seems to be quite a lot of cool projects on forgood.coza as well. So I'm just checking. Are there people already building ventilators? Kobus asked that, I think. So yes, there are. There are quite a lot of people building ventilators, and it's quite a tricky thing to coordinate and figure out what is safe to build, like from a crowdsource point of view, and also sort of helpful. So what we're trying to do is, like, basically, it's a little bit like herding cats in the maker community, trying to just build a database of all of the projects going on and connect them up on the other side to sort of medical professionals needing things. I think that our first summary of that will come out in the next day or two, and then you can see who are all the communities building things. We're also connected to things called Engineers for Good, which is a global thing with thousands and thousands of engineers working on medical devices, and sort of trying to bring that knowledge into South Africa. We have this massive advantage, or that we're a little bit behind, effectively, in that we can see what Italy and Spain and America are learning and then apply it, which is pretty useful. Then someone was asking, how much experience do I need to have to volunteer? What if I'm just starting in the industry? Oh, sorry, I've got it wrong. That was Dylan. So I think volunteering is generally a pretty good way of learning things. At least I found that to be the case. If you're pretty passionate about stuff and just trying to be useful, it's an insanely good way of learning. There is something called the Canvas strategy by Ryan Holiday. I'm going to post it on the Slack channel as well, but that's like a really, really good way I think about thinking about volunteering and helping people while sort of learning and progressing in your career. I've just picked the Harvard Business Review one to post. I hope that's a good one. Okay, then this is quite an important one. I will be graduating soon. What the impact of COVID-19 on SA tech industries? What does it mean for people looking for jobs and internships? I think the sad answer is it's going to make things harder. And I think for a lot of grads, they're already pretty difficult. So that, like, unfortunately, that is I think the reality of the matter. The one nice thing is the government and private sector. So private companies are all really worrying about this problem. One specific thing you could consider doing where we're trying to help is, this is like not a profit thing. It's not for profit. We call it Thrive, which is a mentor program. Like joining something like that, either R1 or another one is a good start. In general, I would say side projects are massively valuable. Like if you have the time and you can find the opportunity to just, like volunteering is a way to do it, to just have a portfolio of side projects as a student, it makes you like much more attractive for companies. So we found definitely, like if we look at our OfferZen data, side projects is a pretty good way to be more competitive and kind of like up your chance of getting a job. And I think with everything happening with COVID-19, there is a huge amount of opportunity to help out, volunteer, and effectively build out a portfolio of side projects. When we're hiring people at OfferZen, even like cool side projects is a nice, like it's a cool way of seeing someone is really serious and they like building things for the fun of it. Then, so we've got a whole lot of questions. I just want to, I've got so many channels running. Cool. So, and I was asking around the track and trace project to hear how it works. That is quite a large thing at like a large mission at this point, involving quite a lot of significant private sector companies like the telcos, and it's being driven by the government. And the main goal there is, if you look at Singapore did this pretty well, as did Hong Kong. If you can like track COVID patients, sort of where they went and who they interacted with, and then do sort of limited quarantines, you can really, as I say, flatten the curve without having to have a like macro societal lockdown. So the government's really, I think, looking at that to try and over time manage in sort of a sane fashion the spread of the virus. You can imagine that there is a lot of like privacy things around, you know, location tracking and stuff, and patient confidentiality. So it is it's quite a tricky project with some large industry heavyweights hopefully coming on board to help. Then one question here, where do you currently see the most potential in helping curb the effects of this crisis? So I suspect my personal view is that the biggest long-term danger will be around kind of economic effects. So if you look at South Africa's general kind of economic situation, we do have a whole lot of people in our society who struggle at the best of times. In a bad economic situation like this, that really gets bad. So if you think kind of being stuck at home and having like, you know, limited things you can buy, whatever is bad, from I think for people in a like earning less or not earning at all, this current situation is really bad. And I'm starting to I think we've got some momentum on the health stuff, and the government's really putting effort behind it. We've got a lot of volunteers. So I'm starting to really think about this economic problem. I think that in the long run will be the most devastating to South Africa if we don't do something there. Then there's a question, how are we going to brief unlockdown volunteers to be fully remote? Fully understanding. I think, so maybe I just talk generally like around how we coordinate this thing remotely, which is quite interesting because we now have hundreds of volunteers and things. What we're finding is like Zoom is pretty good. A video tool like that works really well. We at OfferZen, we've got this like thing we believe or principle, which is default to open. So what we basically say is, in general, default to sharing what you're doing in a public channel. And that kind of like cultural approach work super hard at a time like this, because when you can't just randomly walk past someone's desk and see what they're up to or have a chat, it really, really helps that people already by default sharing what they're doing. It makes it much easier to see if there's opportunity to help someone or whatever. And I think that like default to open principle is a pretty good way of running an organization at a time like this. Apparently our stream died. I'm not sure. Ah, it's back. Tim says it's back. Quibus is asking, no one is talking about the lives cost by lockdown, sort of, like if GDP falls by X, what does that do from a sort of a economic point of view? I don't know if you guys have seen The Big Short, but there's the movie, but there's a part in there where they're getting very excited about the deal they just did, which when the economy tanks, they'll make a lot of money. And the guy says, like, every time the GDP falls by 1%, like so many people die. I think that is work is being done on those kind of models. I do think there are like quite a lot of work. Like we're busy working with the presidency. They've got literally dozens of economists, and we like pulling together, doing surveys, collecting data and stuff on the economic effects. So a lot of work is happening there. The one thing just to say is that is not a like manifest destiny. We can probably change that. Like simple things like just helping people who don't have food get food does not like increase the GDP directly, but it certainly helps them and kind of fights the very, very direct and brutal effects of economic meltdown. So I do think that's not just something that has to happen to us. Like we can help each other get through that. So just a lot of questions coming in. So someone was asking around, like an idea of tracking COVID-related items on a micro level. What about privacy? How does one think about it? I think similar to privacy, a similar problem I have is just like just health stuff as well. Kind of that principle of first do no harm. I think it's incredibly hard at a time like this. Generally, what I've like learned over time works well is just make sure that whatever project you do, you are working with someone who's built up expertise in that field over years and years. So in the case of let's say looking at printing ventilators, like we're talking to let's say people who run a anesthesiology department, at a large public hospital, things like that. Because like as developers, I think we often like you can build solutions really quickly, but it's easy to forget that like you can't just pick up expertise in something like that super quickly. And I think something similar for data privacy. In previous lives, I've spent quite a lot of time on mHealth projects, and what I've learned there is there are a lot of people in the space who've over years and decades developed quite fine-grained views on the balance between privacy and helping people. So I think it's like these are solved problems. Like crises have happened before, maybe not here at this level, but in West Africa with Ebola, they had very, very similar problems with track and trace and the privacy concerns there. So there's quite a lot one can learn from previous things. Trying to check some. A lot of questions and things. I think we're out of time maybe. So just wanted to say thanks very, very much, guys, for your time and the questions and everything, and doing all of this remote. I really appreciate it. If you have any more questions or discussion, I'm going to hang out on the Slack. So please shout there and everything. Thanks so much. And I really appreciate it. Bye.